So, what models can we have for the Franco-German relationship? This is part F of our talk. We're nearly at the end now. Should we consider first that the couple is simply broken? No, I think not. There continue to be tensions. There always have been. There are still joint summits. The ambition for joint policies, for example, on integration of minorities, is still there. And the Aachen Treaty of 2019, although it was strictly speaking unnecessary to ensure cooperation, I think reflects, at any rate, the ambition to perpetuate the Franco-German alliance, to perpetuate the partnership at a very high level. Could we talk about not necessarily a broken couple, but an impotent couple? That is, a couple that do work together but are ignored. No, I think not. Again, anything that has been achieved by the EU in the past 10 years has involved France and Germany, albeit not exclusively. And again, no alternative centre of power has really emerged to make the EU succeed in any particular major policy area. F3, what about the model of simply business as usual? Should we consider that the French and the Germans actually still do run things pretty much, as the Brexiters suggest? Well, probably not. It is true that, for example, they combined to limit reforms to the Common Agricultural Policy in 2003. But the cases, for example, of the Constitution, the Lisbon Treaty, show the limits of a strictly Franco-German deal. Should we then perhaps say, well, the partnership is still there, but it's very much weighted in favour of Germany, that Germany, as it were, calls the shots, and the French more or less do as they're told. You could imagine this from the record of the post-1990 years, but it hasn't really happened in quite that way. In the Kohl years, Germany was still anxious to reassure Germany's European partners of Germany's good European intentions. And then again, the absorption of the German Eastern Länder meant that Germany had a lot to do domestically in the 1990s than its new growth, its new enormous population might have suggested. And so Joschka Fischer, Germany's foreign minister in January 2001, still acknowledged that France is, he said, politically stronger than Germany for historical reasons and will remain so. And indeed, Germany suffered from the absorption of the Eastern Länder, financial strains and loss of competitiveness. And this, again, delayed the emergence of Germany as a sort of hegemonic power within Europe. And indeed, France and Germany, with the economic downturn of 2001 to 3, found themselves as equals, breaking through what seems nowadays the unattainable 3% ceiling on public deficits. The two countries did diverge on former Yugoslavia, but certainly did not on Iraq in 2003. And Schröder's opposition to George W. Bush's Iraq war in that year led to a degree of dependence on France for support against the United States trying to rally Europe behind George W. Bush's project. One might have expected Germany to emerge as a hegemon under Angela Merkel. And certainly Merkel initially was rather successful in getting the Lisbon Treaty and a strong European policy on climate change adopted, and German leadership was quite widely accepted. And when Poland tried to be difficult on climate change, it was isolated. But Merkel has been rather less sure-footed as an assertive leader in Europe since then, at least quite a lot of the time. Germany's Federal Constitutional Court has insisted with increasing frequency on the need to consult the German Parliament on any treaty changes or on any shift in one policy area to another regime, what are known as passerelles in the European Union structure. And the Constitutional Court has also set areas in which the state should retain sovereign control, such as education and the police. And this has, to a degree, constrained Germany as a motor of European integration. Then two elements of the German elite, particularly in Merkel's own party, have become less pro-European. And perhaps Merkel herself didn't quite have a clear European vision to follow up on her earlier successes. Certainly, she was able on occasion to assert a German point of view. For example, Nicolas Sarkozy's initiative on a Mediterranean partnership was largely blocked by Merkel's Germany. Merkel did play, inevitably, a lead role in the Greek crisis and managed to be not quite as harsh as her finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble. She did play a lead role in talks with Russia leading to the Minsk agreements, but that was not done alone. But perhaps the most telling example of the failure of Merkel to act as a German hegemon came with the refugees crisis, where Merkel suggested that Europe ought to be able to absorb a significant influx of destitute refugees from the Middle East in what was, at any rate outwardly, a rather humanitarian, decent policy. And she was rejected at home and abroad. She went ahead anyway, absorbed 1 million refugees into Germany, but incurred considerable popularity for doing so within her own country and very few plaudits from outside Germany. So each of these really shows a degree of limitations on the hegemonic model. We're therefore left with the notion of a couple, a partnership, which is certainly weakened, but which is still crucial to any successes the European Union is likely to achieve. An example was the reaction of France and then of Germany to the world economic crisis that broke in 2008, and the success of Nicolas Sarkozy. France had the European presidency at the time, of convening a Eurogroup meeting, which then led into a G20 meeting, which managed to limit some of the worst consequences of the financial crisis. It suggested German support for French leadership on a rather old-fashioned pattern. Similarly, in the Euro crisis, France pressed Germany half successfully to do rather more than Germany might have been inclined to do had France not been there. The refugee crisis certainly suggests a relative failure on the part of the couple to handle an unexpected and pressing European issue. What will happen on the corona crisis and the enormous financial consequences that it is going to have for the European Union in the coming months and years we can't be certain of at present. Emmanuel Macron's interview with the Financial Times last month in April 2020, as I've suggested, placed the bar rather high by saying that effectively, if Europe didn't start mutualising debt, then the whole European project, and particularly the Eurozone project, could fall apart. We have to hope that Germany finds some way of responding. Let's now begin to finish up. What's the state of the partnership today? Part G. There are reasons to doubt its viability, the viability of its future. Europe is still, perhaps increasingly, a divided continent between a north that is rather financially orthodox, rather financially conservative, and worried about the EU's proximity to an assertive and rather hostile Russia, versus a south financially indebted and strategically more worried about migration in the Middle East. The Franco-German couple finds itself at the centre of this division, able, hopefully, to bridge it, but if they don't succeed, that will be very damaging for the EU. And the danger is that the COVID-19 crisis will bring the division of Europe to breaking point, with pressures in southern countries to leave the European Union or leave the Eurozone or repudiate debt. All of those things are reasons to be doubtful and pessimistic. There are still reasons to hope for the future of the partnership. Public perceptions of Germany and France and of France and Germany have, until recently at least, been broadly favourable. The Euro crisis did not cause a complete north-south split, as it might have done. Divergence in economic terms might not be that great in the longer term, with France reforming and Germany under pressure to consume more and facing the difficulties of an ageing population. Angela Merkel has shown greater understanding, at any rate since 2014-2015, of France's difficulties and of the dangers of the rise of the far right in France. So perhaps Germany will still punch below its weight in foreign and security policy, and Germany remains a reluctant hegemon. And Merkel, at least, has been so far, and I'm talking now about 2020, sympathetic to a much larger EU budget in future to try and repair some of the colossal future economic damage of the COVID-19 crisis. In conclusion, H. You can take a negative view of the Franco-German role in the European project, but I think if you do that, you'll probably take a negative view of the Franco-German partnership as a whole and of the European integration project as a whole. If the European project is necessary, then so is a Franco-German partnership. It's hard to imagine a Europe led by Germany. Few people would want that. It looks too orderly, too rule-bound within, and too timid facing the outside world. On the other hand, a Europe led by France looks a bit too lax at home and a bit too assertive abroad. Both countries are necessary. To a remarkable degree, they've succeeded so far in bringing other nations under the umbrella. If we value the European project, we have to wish for their success, because the stakes now really could hardly have been higher. Thank you all very much. I look forward to talking to you about these themes in our session on Friday, the 15th of May. Thank you. Bye.